Well, it's confession time. Gather round, please. Sitting in judgment, Brother Matthew, of course.
Yes.
Sister Holly, all working very hard this bank holiday. Have they decided to have the bank holiday off?
No.
Absolutely committed to coming in and bringing you the very best music. And then shut up, Simon, and get on with it. Okay. Today's confession comes from Nigel. Nigel, thank you very much, Simon and team. I have a confession which I've kept to myself since I was an 11-year-old schoolboy back in 1969. I went up to big school, was allowed to wear long trousers for the first time. My mum, like most back then, had little spare money, but had managed to buy me 2 pairs of smart, long black trousers for my first term in the big school of St Custard's, just down the road. Yeah. Well, my first day in the new school actually was going great. I was meeting new friends, meeting some old friends, and having a whizzo time exploring all the new school buildings. Chapel, Cadet Force, HQ, the rugger fields, that kind of thing. All was going well until dinner time. While playing in the playground, I fell over and made a hole in the knee of my new trousers. When I arrived home, my mum obviously realised what had happened and went mad at me as I'd only worn them for one day. She then said that Madge, a local lady who was known to be good at sewing, would have to try and repair them, and I'd have to wear the second pair the following day. Well, Father Simon, to say I was unlucky was an understatement, as again, whilst playing with friends at dinner time, in the quad, this time by the prefect's lounge, I fell over and again made a hole in my second pair of new trousers. Of course, in the past, when I fell over, I ended up with a cut knee, but now it seems every time I fell over, I made a hole in my trousers. What is wrong with the quality of trousers these days, I thought? The slightest brush with tarmac and they give up the ghost. What does this say about British manufacturing? The answer to that was I had no idea because I was 11. Back in the late 1960s, early 70s, I always rode my bike to St Custard's, which was a distance of about 1.5 miles. On my journey home, riding my bike, after making this hole in my trousers for the second time, I came across a couple of older boys, Peason and Grabber, to be precise, who blocked my path, which was my route home. I asked in a weedy way, can I go past, please? They just laughed, they scoffed. I then tried passing them on my bike and one of them pushed me over and I fell off my bike. It didn't hurt, but it did frighten me. Then they let me go, laughing about my weediness as they went. They were bullies and ruffians both. I think we've come to that conclusion. But it then came to me that when I arrived home with yet another hole in my trousers, I could tell my mum that it wasn't my fault, but it was Grabber and Peason who'd pushed me off my bike. Even though that wasn't what had caused the hole in my trousers. So when I got home, Mum did go mad, but when I told her it wasn't my fault and explained that the bully had pushed me off my bike and that had ripped my trousers, well, I explained all this to my mum and she said, who did it? And I said, it was Grabber. And she said, right, come with me. I'm taking you round to Grabber's house. Now I'm going to show his mum what's happened. So off we went. Because this is the way it happened in the late 60s and early 70s. Now, my mum was one of those people who was never scared of standing up for herself. So after knocking at the door of the bullies, she told Grabber's mother, who was called Mrs. Grabber, in no uncertain terms, what she thought and that she should pay for a new pair of trousers, which she duly did and said she would take the money from her son's bank account.
Wow.
To this day, I have never told anyone the truth, especially the boy who pushed me over. Yes, Grabber. And to make things worse, from the age of 19, Grabber and I have actually been friends. And we still both live in the same town. However, please, can you forgive me, says young Nigel, for this. Well, what's interesting about this school is that everyone will relate to having a hole in the school trousers. And the school uniform, which has been bought at a great price, and there you go, damaged. Day 1, damaged day 2. Blaming on the bullies. Let's see if that's going to be good enough to get any forgiveness from our very tough studio producer, Sister Holly. That's a very stern face on.
I don't know if it's because it's the start of the week, it's a bank holiday, and maybe I'm just feeling a little bit generous. But I have to say, blaming it on the bullies, I'm kind of for, frankly. Peason and Grabber, they were not nice boys. They pushed him off the bike. You know, that's nasty. That could have definitely caused a hole in the trousers, and I think they kind of deserved it. And maybe, actually, Grabber ended up being nicer, and that's how they ended up being friends. And so it all ended well in the end. And so really, I think I probably do forgive this one.
That is very generous, but also very logical. You could have blamed it on the sunshine, could have blamed it on the boogie, but no, you can blame it on Grabber and Peason. And the good times. But also blame it on the bullies. That also works. Brother from another gutter.
What I love about this is that there is every chance that Grabber is listening to this and recognises himself in the story, because you definitely remember having to pay for someone else's trousers out of your pocket money. I certainly would. So I think it's a winner, this one. I'm definitely going to be forgiven, because apart from anything else, should we be applauding someone having the quick thinking sense about them to be able to come up with that wheeze about having pushed over and that's what left you with a hole in your trousers? Yes, we should applaud on today of all days, being it Bank Holiday Monday. Let us definitely applaud that and say definitely forgiven.
61054. First word is Simon, particularly if your answer makes more sense than that.
Was there a sentence end at the end of that?
I don't think so. And before the news, a confession from Nigel about torn school trousers, bullies, and Mrs. Grabber taking the money out of Grabber's savings. So maybe justice was done. Let's see what the people verdict says.
So Ron says not forgiven. He started a web of lies, blaming it on his friend and embarrassing his mum, who got caught up in it too. He's lucky to still have friends. But Phil says forgiven. Simon, if you ask me, the bully had it coming. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. And if it also gets you out of trouble with your mum, then that's a double win. And Susan says not forgiven. Simon, I think we're missing the real crime here. Yes. Nigel still ruined 2 new expensive trousers within 2 days. Even if the excuse can be forgiven, I can't forgive him for being so reckless with his clothes that his mum spent good money on.
Stand on your feet, man.
Yes.
That's all you have to do. Your confession would be very welcome. Send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Greatest Hits Radio, 5:46. And we have another confession. Today's comes from Larry. Thank you, Larry. Father Simon, Brother Matthew, and Sister Holly Susie. That kind of
covers both, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Thanks for a great show and a great radio station.
You're welcome.
It's how it starts. Forgiven. Okay. Here's the confession, Father Simon. I've never told anyone this story before. I've never shared it with a soul. The year is 1977. I was 17. And I just started a job as a freight forwarding clerk. In addition to the expected office duties, I had the opportunity to escape the office from time to time and collect urgent documents from customers across the county. Sometimes I'd collect small air freight packages too, and instead of overtime, I'd be given free use of the small Vauxhall Viva van for the evening in return for driving over to Manchester Airport with the urgent packages. And I'd receive £5 in cash too. Great times. Is how we defined a great time.
It was great
in
times.
1977.
Yeah.
Use of the van and a £5.
Yeah.
I liked the job, the bosses liked me, and that same year they disposed of the old Vauxhall Viva van and bought a brand spanking new Vauxhall Chevette van. It had heating that worked, much better brakes that also worked, a loud radio that worked, and also looked much smarter. This was very important. This was all to come crashing down because of one rather small and simple mistake. I pulled up to the automated barrier at the entrance to the office block car park one lunchtime. As I'd done many times, I dropped the sun visor to get the plastic card to pop into the machine, but it wasn't there. These security keys were in demand and a colleague must have taken it out. As only a 17-year-old can, I jumped out of the van, slammed the door and popped under the barrier to go down into the car park to get the lift to the 8th floor to get a card. Yes, down to the car park. The barrier was at the top of a very steep incline.
Oh, no.
Very, very steep. And suddenly I heard a very loud crack, and the wooden barrier whistled past my head, and the van was following.
What?
My mistake was that in my hurry to get the pass, jump out of the car, slam the door, I'd forgotten to put on the handbrake.
Oh, dear.
Yes, indeed. As mistakes go with consequences, this one took the biscuit and the barrier. The van had smashed into the barrier, and now as I tried to jump out of the way, it ran over my foot.
Oh.
It then went straight as an arrow down the incline. It smashed head-on into a rather nice Ford Cortina, which then smashed into the back wall after lurching sideways and popping both side windows of a smaller Volkswagen. This was carnage, Father Simon, with emphasis on the car. Now, it's strange what runs through your mind at moments of crisis like this. Anyway, I limped to the Vauxhall Chevette van, looking very sorry for itself in front of the Cortina, opened the driver's door and put the handbrake on. It was unnecessary because it couldn't move, but anyway. I then hobbled to the lift and waited at the ground floor reception rather dazed, probably too embarrassed to go up to the office. Someone rang for an ambulance and the hospital released me that evening with nothing more than a sprained and strapped ankle. However, I'd like your forgiveness, not for the accident, because that could happen to anyone. Well, I'm not sure about that. No, when one of the directors phoned me that evening, shall we call him Roger? When Roger phoned me that evening at home, concerned for my welfare, I didn't correct him when he said he'd seen that the handbrake was on, so obviously it hadn't been adjusted correctly at the van's first service. And words would need to be said at the garage.
Yeah.
Of course, everyone there was entirely innocent. I didn't have to worry about a thing, said the director. As soon as I was back at work, he said he'd send me out in his new Alfa Romeo Berliner.
Ooh.
He couldn't have been nicer. He also explained that it was quite a scene that afternoon as the street was temporarily closed whilst a breakdown truck carefully winched up three damaged cars from the basement and with 2 other trucks transported them away. The van was promptly repaired with a new front bumper, front sill, front grille, all front lights and a new bonnet, together with both front wings. Apart from that, carry on as you were. Yours in hope of forgiveness, says Larry. He's never told anyone this story. But what's interesting about this is, I mean, maybe it could happen to anybody. However, did someone cop it at the garage because they thought it was the garage's fault and not Larry's fault? Sister Holly, Susie.
Yes, well, the thought of it all crashing into each other is really rather hilarious. I know it's bad. I know I shouldn't laugh, but it is very funny. And it all, I mean, obviously no one was seriously hurt. Obviously, if they were, wouldn't be laughing. But the thought of it all crashing into each other, very, very funny. I mean, I do feel sorry mainly for the people at the garage who had words said to them that they hadn't sorted out the handbrake properly when they serviced the car. And so I think for that reason, I'm not going to forgive, even though it was a funny story, because those poor people were told off for something that they shouldn't have been told off about.
Sister Susie's had words with you, hasn't she?
Yeah, I think I was very relaxed yesterday, and I forgave, and then today
you regretted it ever since.
Quite right.
Brother from another gutter.
Rod of iron. I'm going to forgive. And here's the reason why. I mean, why wasn't the garage replacing the handbrake as well as replacing all the headlights and everything else? Should be replacing the handbrake because it looked like the handbrake wasn't working, even though we know that it was. Also, looks like it's a design problem with the underground car park. Stop designing your underground car parks with a massive, steep incline, or this is just going to happen. So car park designers, it's all down to you. Also, I've had my own scrapes in an underground car park. In a previous life, I managed to scrape a hire car in Switzerland. And when I returned it at the airport, the woman said, "You will hear from us again, Mr. Williams." And I never did.
Was she in a Bond film?
In your face, Mr. Europe car. So, yes, forgiven.
I have been expecting you, Mr. Pond.
You shall hear from us again.
Okay, so basically you're saying it's the architect's fault?
Yes.
Okay.
Always them.
All right, very good. Okay, so split decision here. People's verdict. Do you forgive Larry? Yes or no? 61054 on the text. First word is Simon. Pardon? Oh, beg your pardon.
That bell for 1967.
Because I dropped to the bell and now it's pinging for no reason.
Great.
Anyway, Tuesday will continue very shortly. Meantime, Larry sent in Tuesday's confession. His was the car park confession, where he didn't pull on the handbrake The van goes down the hill, crashes into a whole bunch of cars, but maybe the garage copped it because they could have got the blame. Anyway, here's the people's verdict.
So Jason's forgiving. When he pulled the handbrake back on after the crash, Larry wasn't intentionally trying to blame the garage. Sometimes people just see what they want to see. It wasn't his fault for simply going along with it. Stephen says it was the 70s, accidents happened, and we were still happy to call them accidents without having to launch an expensive inquiry so that everyone could agree it was
right?
just an accident after all. Laz says, like Matt says, who builds a car park on a steep hill? Fools. But Paul says, someone please ask Matt how cars are meant to get into an underground car park if there are no downslopes.
It's a very good
point.
It is a very good point. Larry, thank you. You've got the smart speaker. If you fancy getting one yourself, send your confession to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Okay, yes, it's that time. Send yours to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Today's confession comes from Louis. Possibly Louis. Let's go with Louis. Hi, Simon, brother Matt, and sister Holly Susie. All here and present and correct. My confession starts in the summer of 1978. My friends and I, being 14 years old and having to find our own entertainment during the school summer holidays. Remember, this is before the days of PCs and games consoles and mobile phones. We relied on good old British qualities of imagination, pluck and daring do, to quote Chaucer. Something that doesn't happen enough on your otherwise splendid radio station. Are there any other... I haven't heard a lot of Chaucer on Greatest Hits.
No.
And maybe I've missed something.
Underserved, yeah.
Okay. Where we live, Father Simon, there is a very old golf club, and we came up with a plan to have some fun with the golfers, who obviously you know have a great sense of humour.
Yeah.
One of the tees where the golfers tee off from had a high probability of the golf ball landing under a very large, low-hanging willow tree. So when the golfers weren't around, myself and several mates climbed into the branches above, waiting for someone's golf ball to land under us. We were like a troop of monkeys in the branches, moving from branch to branch, waiting our moment to pounce. One of my pals was extremely athletic in every respect, particularly climbing trees. He was our King Louis, the king of the swingers. He was our jungle VIP.
Yeah.
But we weren't interested in man's red fire. No, we were interested in man's white golf ball. Eventually our patience paid off as our golf ball landed below us. Quick as a flash, my pal was down and back up the tree with a golf ball in his hand. The golfers wandered around, hunting in the grass for their golf ball below the tree, obviously looking down at the grass and not up in the tree, so they didn't see us. We stifled our laughter looking down on them. After a couple of minutes, they wandered off, scratching their heads and muttering to each other that they were sure that the ball had landed underneath the willow tree, but apparently not. We carried this on for a couple of weeks, acquiring a number of golf balls to our great joy, although I realise now that this was thieving, which
This is not added in afterwards, is it?
cannot be tolerated, and there is no excuse for it. Anyway,
Yeah.
Word must have got around the golf members about the willow tree that it had become like the Bermuda Triangle of golf balls. Maybe there was some strange force field in operation. Maybe it was a gateway to a parallel universe, another dimension in time. The answer, as so often, is no, it was just boys being boys. On one occasion, waiting for our quarry, a golf ball, one eagle-eyed golfer caught a glimpse of my pal King Louis picking up the golf ball. The shout went up, and every golfer within earshot started running towards the willow tree. Father Simon, you've never seen so many Pringle jumpers and red corduroy trousers moving at such speed. Some of the golfers were running, I believe, for the first time in decades. We all hit the ground running, splitting up and going in every direction. Imagine the scene in The Great Escape where the guards see one of the prisoners escaping out the hole and all the prisoners scatter. "Come back here, you pesky kids," they shouted like they were in Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
Confusing our cultural references here. Unsurprisingly, we all got away, apart from... we got away from this posse of righteous golfers, except for one lad who was caught walking along a bridleway, but he played dumb, saying he didn't have a clue what they were talking about, and he was set free, even though he had a pocket full of golf clubs, balls even, if they'd bothered to have a look.
Yeah.
So, dear Confessional Collective, I do not ask forgiveness for what we did to the golfers, who I'm sure saw it as amusing and told many of their friends. I ask forgiveness for the old willow tree which was sadly cut down shortly after our escapade. Many thanks. So it takes a kind of an unlikely turn there at the end. Never mind the golfers, it's the tree that copped it. Though who's to say whether it's anything to do with Louis and his friends? Because it might have been an unhealthy tree. We just don't know.
No.
But Sister Holly Susie's going to take a tough line on this.
I feel sorry for the tree. What about the tree? Justice for the tree is what I'm thinking here. Louis, it wasn't good. Taking the golf balls, never good. I actually worked at a golf course for a little bit. I was dreadful, and I knew absolutely nothing about golf. But golf
what did you
balls
do then?
I just served some tea and coffee or something behind behind the desk. But yeah, golf balls are expensive. That's what I've learned. And so actually, I can imagine those people would have been very upset,
very annoyed,
with their golf balls going missing. However, yes, I think really the main thing here is I'm not going to forgive because of the tree, not for the golfers themselves.
Okay. Well, I thought that's the line that Holly Susie would take. Brother Matthew?
Will no one think of the salmon-trousered golfers? Not me, not really. I mean, if you can afford those trousers, you can afford plenty more golf balls. That's what I'm saying. And also, I'm going to say that the tree was probably on its last legs, probably about to come down anyway. My experience of trees is that you only get rid of them when there's a problem. And there was clearly a problem with this willow tree, so it was going to come down. And also, this kid gets stopped with a pocket full of golf balls. How do they not notice a pocket full of golf balls in his pockets? It's
the golfer's fault.
The golfer's fault, again, with their trousers. So, yes, I'm going to forgive.
Is the people's verdict, please? Do you forgive Louis, yes or no? 61054. First word is Simon. Tonight's confession came from Louis. It was about golf balls and about making golfers run very fast in their Pringle sweaters and salmon trousers. All stereotypes welcome. The people's verdict is in on Louis' crime, and here it comes.
So Pip says 100% forgiven. Willow trees are not particularly long-lived and also prone to splitting, so I suspect the golf ball ambush had very little to do with its demise. But Jimmy says not forgiven. I'm one of those salmon-trousered wearing golfers, and I will say that those golf balls are very expensive. Yes. I would have been chasing Louis out of the club. But Vicky in Northampton says the ones needing forgiveness are those who thought the best way to solve the crime of the century was to cut down a perfectly good tree. How typical of golfers to put their own enjoyment over the natural environment. They are not forgiven.
I suppose it might not have been the golfers that decided that. It may well have been
the golf club.
The golf club or the council or whoever it is who saw that tree and they said that tree needs to go for whatever reason.
Who knows?
Louis, thanks very much for the confession. If you have a confession, we would love to hear about it. You might even get a smart speaker for your pain. Send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. It's a Black Forest Gatto on the way. I think with more booze than any Black Forest Gatto should be humanly possible. Anyway, details coming up after 6. Confession time. Sister Holly is in the house and in charge. Brother Matthew, here we go. That was an unnecessary woo. I think it was. Anyway.
Yeah.
Catherine sends in today's tale, Father Simon and the Revered Confessional Collective. Having heard recent confessions about school days, I was reminded of a guilty tale that still plays on my mind, although it happened very many years ago. To set the scene, Father Simon, I have to take you back to the innocence of the late 70s. In a very small, sheltered, extremely strict, minor denominational church school somewhere in the south of England, Porridge Court. We led an innocent life. To give you an example, records with a beats per minute at a faster rate than a regular human heartbeat were considered the devil's work.
Right. Quite right.
And were banned.
Yeah.
That's the kind of school it was. I was a shy, goody-goody church elder's daughter and the only girl in our very small A-level maths class. As such, I was our maths teacher's favourite. I really did love maths with a passion and was seen by some of the boys as a bit of a maths swot and a teacher's pet. The maths teacher was Mr. Sigismund. When he got cross, he went very red in the face, which, with little else to entertain us in our innocent world, we loved to see. For some inexplicable reason, we had our maths lesson in a small room at the back of what was known as the estate hall, which was a rather grand term for a corrugated-roofed multi-purpose assembly room. The door to this classroom led directly outside and was always locked with a Yale lock, unless a class was underway, and of course, Mr. Sigismund held the key. On the afternoon in question, Sigismund had just set us an exciting maths challenge, whatever that was, and then said to us that he had left a textbook in the staff room, that old trick, and he went off to fetch it, closing the door behind him. The staff room was across the playground, into the main school building, up 2 flights of stairs and along a long corridor, so we knew he'd be gone for at least 10 minutes. Being the goody-goody I was of course carrying on with our set, exciting maths assignment, while the boys immediately started messing around. That is until one of them noticed that Mr. Sigismund had left the classroom key on his desk. A plan was immediately hatched by the boys to put the latch down on the Yale lock to prevent Mr. Sigismund from being able to open the door on his return, thinking that when we finally let him in, we would see another example of the red-faced Sigismund we loved. I did warn you that we lived in a very innocent world back in our school. Goody-good me, of course, said, "You can't do that, it's mean." At which point the boys decided it would be even funnier if I was the one who locked him out, as he would never guess it was me. Seeing a rare opportunity to momentarily be seen as cool by the boys, I reluctantly agreed and got up from my desk and put the latch down. A few minutes later we heard someone trying the door, and obviously we ignored it. There was then knocking on the door, and the knocking became louder and louder and louder. Then we finally heard Sigismund shouting crossly, "Open this door!" Of course, as the goody-goody of the class, I immediately went to let him in, and we were rewarded with a very, very crimson-faced, very cross maths teacher demanding to know who had locked him out. "What do you mean, sir?" we all cried. "The latch must have slipped down when you shut the door." "Don't be ridiculous," Sigismund said. "Which of you boys locked me out?" "It was Catherine, sir," they all said. "Don't be ridiculous," Sigismund shouted. "Of course Catherine wouldn't do such a thing. Now tell me, who did this, or we're going to stay here until we do."
Oh, yeah.
"I did it, sir," I confessed in a small apologetic voice, now beginning to regret my actions, as he really was quite cross by now, and boy was he red. Mr. Sigismund looked at me and said, "Don't let the boys bully you, Catherine. Of course I know it wasn't you." The boy said, "But, sir, it was her, honestly." Sigismund continued to refuse to believe this, and so kept us all in over lunchtime, telling the boys to think carefully about what they had done. "And so," says Catherine, "I wish to ask forgiveness not from the boys for losing their lunchtime, for I did enjoy momentarily being seen as cool, but from Mr. Sigismund, the mad maths master, who never knew that goody-goody Catherine had succumbed to this moment of temptation. Father Simon and the confessional crew, I hope that you can find it in you to forgive this one lapse in an otherwise unblemished school career of being a goody-goody maths swat." Well, an inspiring tale from Catherine. Her school, Porridge Court, sounds a bit of a stinker, I think. But anyway, let's check in with Sister Holly with the voice of responsibility and the burden of responsibility on her slender shoulders.
Well, Catherine, I think the thing is, it's a classic tale of peer pressure. You were goody two-shoes, you were doing the best thing, you were doing your maths, you were working really hard, and then these horrible boys...
It's always boys.
Just roped you into doing this. And on one level, I feel like I probably should forgive. However, I think eventually you should have come clean. I know you did initially, but you should have insisted.
She said, "I did it." I mean, I don't know what else.
I know, but maybe, like, I don't know, a few days later or a week later, she could have said, "Oh, you know, by the way, actually, yeah, that was me," and just really owned up for it. And so, yeah, I think on balance, I don't forgive, but it was a classic tale of peer pressure, and she shouldn't have been a sheep, and she should have stood her ground.
She did say, "I did it," but I mean, I can't think what else she could have done. Brother from another gutter.
What is there to forgive? She said, "Yeah, I did it. I don't believe you. No, I did do it. I still don't believe you." I think a perfect crime here. I wonder whether, in fact, Catherine was playing the long game by being the goody two-shoes, because it meant that she could do whatever she wanted, admit it, and no one would ever believe her. Excellent work. I'm absolutely in your corner,
She's
Catherine.
probably a career criminal now.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say. And she's going to say, "Yeah, no, that was me." And everyone go, "No, you're far too nice." So, yes, I'm going to say forgiven.
Okay, people's verdict, please. Do you forgive Catherine her goody-goody two-shoes confession? 61054 on the text. First word is Simon. people's verdict is in like this.
So Sue in Liverpool says, forgiven. I feel sorry for her. She came clean after being peer pressured into locking the door. Catherine sounds like a good egg to me. Beth says not forgiven purely for the reason she enjoyed maths. I was so bored in maths, I'd be desperate to get involved in any crazy shenanigans. And Alex from Cambridge says, forgiven. She got pressured into doing it. She let the teacher back in and then owned up. Twice. The boys, however, are not forgiven. They made her do their dirty work and then immediately grassed her up. Treacherous cowards. Which went a bit dark at the end there, Alex.
Treacherous cowards. Yeah. I like that very much indeed. All right, thank you. Your confession, please, for next week, may be inspired by Catherine.